There we go.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'll give everyone a few seconds to join. This is Sabrina Paganoni and this is our weekly platform trial update, actually the first one of 2022. So I'm very excited that you chose to join us again. And to those of you who are new, welcome for your first webinar of 2022. We can go to the next slide, please. So I really wanted to start with a big thank you. I was telling my friends that, I actually went back to Italy for Christmas, was there for 2 weeks, and I was telling everyone about this amazing community. That's really, the first thing they asked me, I had not been back for 2 years. And so they wanted to know what I was doing, and really what I'm doing, what I'm spending my time on is time, to develop new treatments for ALS. And I'm really, really grateful to do it because of the community, including the entire patient community, and especially people who follow us on the webinars, whether you are watching this live or the recording. It's just so amazing to be back and know that there is a community there and we're working together to achieve the same goal. So just wanted to start with that as we start 2022, and this is only going to be the first of many weekly meetings and hopefully an exciting year with many new advances and announcements. There's been so many announcements in ALS over the last few weeks, like almost every day there's a new press release and everything goes in the right direction. I know it still takes time and we're never fast enough, but I'm really, really hopeful. So I want to start the year with really sharing my hope and my gratitude for all of you who are part of this and really inspire all the work that we're going to describe right now. What have we done over the last 2 years? Well, people have been thinking about COVID and we've been thinking about developing new drugs. If you can go to the next slide, we started 2020 with 3 drugs. We said we were going to keep adding them. And that's really what we've been doing over the last couple of years. We started 2020 with 3 drugs, zilucoplan, verdiperstat, and CNM-Au8 in this trial. Then if you can click one more time. By the time we ran in 2021, we had added drug number 4, pridopidine. So if you can go to the next slide, now we are about to start drug number 5, trialos, which is very exciting. And we will have a webinar over the next few weeks. We're still scheduling it with the scientists from trialos so that you can learn more about this new drug that we're adding in January to the platform trial. So really the goal of the platform trial is to continue to add drugs, test as many drugs as possible for ALS until there are cures for everyone. And as you can see, we continue to add, but it's not just adding, it's also following the participants who are on the study. So if you can go to the next slide, what we're really excited about is that despite the pandemic and thanks to all of your participation, we were able to complete enrollment for regimens A, B, C, and D. And that's really a monumental milestone. We actually announced it earlier this week that even regimen D was completed in terms of enrollment. So what does that mean? That means that in every regimen, there's about 160 people who are contributing to the testing of the efficacy of these drugs. And thanks to their participation, we will soon be able to know if these drugs work or not for ALS. Now, we do need to follow even the last few participants for at least 6 months. So that means that puts us kind of, in later, kind of mid 2022, that's when the last person who was enrolled in these regimens will finish the placebo-controlled portion of the trial. And so at that point, only when the last person that was enrolled finishes the placebo-controlled portion of the trial, we will know the results of that respective regimen. So it's going to be roughly around the same time that we will have the results for these regimens. Perhaps not exactly on the same day. Again, it depends a little bit on the last participant per regimen, but roughly around the same time, we will have results for all the 4 drugs later this year. And if you can click one more time, I do want to mention that in addition to following the people who are on double-blind, the placebo-controlled period of the trial, we're also following hundreds of people that are now on open-label extension. So that means that the people that have already contributed their time to the 6-month placebo-controlled trial are now given the option to receive active drug long-term. We will keep them if they wish to be on the active drug, until we know the results of the trials, so that, you know, obviously if the results are positive, you know, we will extend that. If the results are negative, then we will have to find new options for them. Next slide. And again, I want to highlight that we communicated the enrollment milestone earlier this week through a press release for Regimen D, and we're really grateful for our partnership with all of you. Next slide. I also want to mention that we recently published our very first collaborative paper, which we're very excited about. One of the goals of the trial is obviously, you know, the first goal is to test new drugs and bring new drugs to market. But another goal is really to reflect on the experience, share it with the entire scientific community, so that others can learn from this experience, and so that we can all develop and launch new trials and better trials, and continue to grow together as a scientific community. So we published our first collaborative paper earlier this week to explain sort of the concept and the structure of the trial, and then we have other papers that we're working on, and in sort of, you know, in the clinical trial landscape, it's very important to publish and communicate results quickly, and so I expect that we will have several publications this year. Next slide. And other project for 2022, in addition to adding more drugs, completing the first few regimens, publishing more papers, is also to bring the trial to more locations. And so the map shows sort of the sites that are coming online, and we'll, you know, we're working with them so that they can join too. Next slide. As always, if you have questions, please contact Catherine and Alison. Thank you, Catherine and Alison, for being on the line with us today. And thank you also for producing these helpful QR codes that can take you directly to helpful links to either register for future webinars like this one. I do want to put in a plug for the ALS link, which is our hospital's newsletter, our ALS clinics newsletter. And some of the content is related to our clinic, but also we do send maybe on a weekly basis or so information about ALS research, as well as invitations to different webinars. Next slide. And Catherine and Alison are currently preparing a 2022 schedule with other guest speakers. Today I'm here by myself, but normally we have Dr. Sukovic here, and we have other site investigators who join us so that we can get to know their sites, or we have fantastic guests from the many groups that help support the trial, such as the Muscular Dystrophy Association. So I'm particularly excited that we will have Sharon Esterly from the MDA join us next week, and will tell us more about the MDA's involvement in this trial. So again, these are the QR codes. Please continue to follow us, and we will share the updated schedule over the next few weeks as we finalize the list of speakers. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and I'm trying to, oh, sorry, in the Q&A box. So that we can take them. So I'm gonna start taking a few questions that are coming in live now. So the first question is, now that the platform trial has a number of placebo participants in the pool, so if you think about the first 3 regimens, each regimen has 40 people on placebo, so it's a total of 120 people on placebo in the placebo pool for the first 3 regimens. And then obviously we continue to feed into that pool so that we can actually have more placebo data to compare to. So the question is, what will happen now that we have more than 120 people on placebo in the pool? Will we have improved placebo ratio or improved power of efficacy of assessment? That's a great question. So in the short term, we have improved power to test the drugs. So that's good. So having more placebo participants to compare to is helpful. And so actually for the new, the new regimens are lucky. They come in and they have sort of, as a bonus, they have more, a larger placebo pool to compare their drug to, and that actually helps their power. So that's an immediate benefit, I guess. And then in the future, we would love to change the active to placebo ratio to be even more favorable. As you know, sort of historically, the ratio of active to placebo has been 50-50, 1-to-1, and then we really push to improve it. And because of the platform approach, where we share placebo participants, we can really dramatically reduce the number of people on placebo and increase the number of people on active drug with a ratio of 3-to-1. So that means that for every 4 people who enter the trial, 3 will be on active and only 1 on placebo. Still, we want to continue to do better than that. And so hopefully, we will be able to improve the ratio in the future. First, we do need to show that the placebo pool remains a sort of a valid comparison over time. So we do, the first few regimens will be a very important sort of proof of concept in a way, where our statisticians constantly monitor for drift over time. And as long as that doesn't happen, meaning the placebo pool remains, a valid comparator for the new regimens, we can continue, hopefully we can continue to use all the placebo data as we expect to be able to and change the ratio in the future. So I think this is not the end of the story. We will continue to improve on that. But first, again, we have to demonstrate that all of this is true. So we'll do that. We'll obviously, that's a high priority. So the question about results, when do you expect the results to be presented? Will it happen on this webinar or something else? That's a great question. So now there's a few moving pieces here. We, first of all, in terms of the timelines, we now have timelines for the expected what we call last participant, last visit per regimen. So based on that, we can start to map out expected timelines for when we have the final piece of data. That may vary a little bit as people may make different choices, again, going into the open label extension or not, or dropping out, etc. So it's an expectation, it's an estimate. And keep in mind, because we do use the placebo data, in a way, the first few regimens are a little bit interdependent, and they're a little bit connected, because we do need the participants it's not just enrollment, they have to complete the follow-up. So, and because we share placebo, it has to be people from different regimens. So when all of this happens by June, July of 2022, then we will have the final data point. Now, I do want to mention that this is a complex study. We have a lot of data points, including, assessments that are done in real time, but also voice recordings, biomarkers, neurofilaments, other things. The vendors need to analyze some of these, and they cannot do it until the very final biosamples come in. So there's a lot of pieces that need to be collected and integrated and then analyzed. All of this to say that it's going to take a few weeks to have all the results. So again, I don't know the exact timelines, but I just wanted to give you a sense of, we need to wait to follow the participants. We need to wait for all the placebo from other regimens to be completed, and we need to integrate all the data. How that gets presented, that's a great question. I mean, we're starting to map out the publication plan, and so hopefully there will be press releases, and I'm sure we'll have publications, etc. I'll tell you more maybe later on. Again, we're here every week. I don't have everything figured out, just as as of today, but we will continue to work on it and keep you posted. So a question is from a participant. Is somebody, when I complete my regimen, that's the question, and if I don't want to enter the open label extension, what's the process to get into a different regimen? So you can actually restart the process all over again. So please talk to your site, to your coordinator and physician, and essentially, if still eligible, you can restart from the very beginning. Another question is, if a drug is positive, let's say that we have a positive result, how do we get access to that drug? Well, that's a great question. I mean, all of these will depend obviously on the exact results. Let's say that later this year in 2022, we find out that one or more of these drugs work, then I expect that the open label extension for the people who are in that open label extension will be extended and continue. For the people who are not participating in the trial, there might be expanded access options. Obviously, there's a very dynamic field right now, as you know, in terms of expanded access for ALS. So I don't know exactly what it would look like in a few months. There's a lot of work that's going into that. I hope that there will be good developments there. And obviously the best way to get access is if a drug is approved. And as discussed in previously, the trial was designed to be able to provide robust enough data to support approval if the results are positive. So it's not just the results, it's also how you analyze it and the data quality and the quality assurance. There's a whole process of monitoring the data, cleaning the data, etc., that has to be done in order for a positive result to count in a way. And we have all the processes figured out. So we are doing it in a way that the data is collected appropriately and in a way that would support an application if the trial is positive. So that would be the best way to get access to a positive drug to sort of support fast approval. In terms of how many clinics, how many sites will be offering regimen E, we are actually going through the process of activation right now. I don't know what the final number will be. Obviously, we hope that as many as possible, if not all the sites, will be able to participate. Again, we're going through that process again. Every time a new regimen starts, so that because of the platform trial concept, the startup of every site is much shorter than in a regular trial, but we still need to train the sites. Again, part of that high quality data and sort of the process that the FDA requires, part of that process is training the sites and making sure that they perform the study the exact same way everywhere. So there's no difference in terms, whether you are enrolled on the East Coast or West Coast, it doesn't make any difference from the point of view of the drug that you take or the processes or the data collection. It has to be exactly the same everywhere. And so that's what we're working on as we speak, activating as many sites as possible. So I think the majority of sites will participate. The exact final number, we will let you know as soon as we get to that point over the next few weeks. So there's a couple, there's a question about expanded access. A couple of these drugs have been accessible to patients outside of clinical trials. I think the person who's asking is referring to the EAP companion or expanded access program companion to the platform trial. So essentially we are offering expanded access to some of the drugs that are in the platform trial itself as part of an EAP program. So are there any plans to increase the number of patients on EAP? Absolutely. We're working on fundraising to be able to do that. The only limitation again is funding. At this point, we have been funding all of this through philanthropy and private donations. I know that there's recent legislative changes that might open up other avenues for funding, and certainly we will pursue all possible avenues, but that's the limiting factor. And there's a separate question about the EAP. Is the EAP data helpful to supplement essentially the data from the platform trial? I would say yes and no. So we do collect safety from all our EAP participants, and that's common practice. So in the EAPs, are still FDA regulated studies, and you are required to monitor safety for a good reason, so that we can learn from this experience. And so participating in an EAP augments our safety database. It doesn't directly tell us about the efficacy of the drug, but nevertheless, it still helps in terms of the safety database. And some of these EAPs, not all, but some have some biomarker component. How close is the platform trial to having a regimen F? Great question. We are actively working on that. I cannot give you an exact timeline right now, but again, we will keep you posted on the weekly webinars. We are working with a couple of companies, actually F and G, and we'll see again which one goes first. It depends on more technical and logistical things more than anything else, and so we're actively working on that as well. There's a question about Courage ALS, the cytokinetics trial. So I know this is not about this particular trial. The question is, are you familiar with the Courage trial and how the drug may be affected for treating the progression of ALS? The drug is called Reldesemtiv. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce it. It's made by Cytokinetics. Yes, actually, I'm the side PI of the trial at MGH, and we are starting to enroll right now for that trial. I do want to say that, you know, while I'm obviously very passionate about the platform trial, I do think it's very important that all trials move on and enroll, because again, we want to cast a broad net and we want to hopefully, you know, test as many drugs as possible within the platform trial, but also outside of the platform trial. And so, yes, many sites are now enrolling, including our site for the cytokinetics study. It works through a little bit of a different mechanism. It's more a troponin activator. It activates muscle, and they had you know, good data from previous studies. So I think it's important that these studies now, Courage ALS is now enrolling, because it's a phase 3 study. So it will be the definitive test of this drug, and we will know if that works or not, you know, as the trial is completed. So a question about TADCA and sodium phenylbutyrate, which are the components of AMX35. The question is, can you be in the platform trial if you're taking those sort of on the side? So at this time, and again, now it's January 2022, that is not possible, because TADCA and sodium phenylbutyrate, or AMX35, are still considered experimental. As we have said in the past, if a drug is approved by the FDA, we will allow it in the trial. So we do allow riluzole, edaravone, Nuedexta, and any other drug that's FDA approved in the trial, but we cannot allow experimental drugs. Again, the situation might change, and if it does, it will be allowed. So there's a question about sort of more drugs coming. Are there more drugs coming? Right now, we are only working on regimen E. Well, yes, we're working on regimen E in terms of activation. But I can tell you, so immediate launch, but I can tell you that we're working with at least a couple of other industry partners sort of concretely to start this up over the next few months. And then we also have a number of other conversations with other companies, you know, for possible inclusion. So again, we are actively working on adding more drugs to the platform trial. All right, I'm trying to look at a few other topics. So there's a comment here about Act for ALS and how it will impact us and this trial. Well, first of all, you know, I'm still learning myself about Act for ALS that was just signed into law, I believe, last week. And last night I attended a fantastic webinar that I believe will be on the Everything ALS social media channels soon. I think that's a great webinar. We had there were a few speakers who spoke. Dr. Sukovic was on, IMALS was on, and I think it's really great that we are all they really explained this Act for ALS, and essentially the way this works is that it provides very substantial funding for expanded access, but also some funding for other important initiatives and research and other trials. So I think it has very ambitious goals and great goals. I'm so happy and thankful for the community for really supporting this important piece of legislation. So essentially, the most immediate impact, I think, will be on expanded access in general, not related to this trial, but in general, you know, supporting expanded access. I told you earlier that the biggest problem was for us, for the EAP companion, is that we had to keep working on fundraising to be able to increase it and offer it to more people. And so Act for ALS creates an additional source of funding, not just for us, obviously for everyone who wants to do that, to set up EAPs for their patients. So that's great. That's the majority of the funding. And then there's also some funding for research and other initiatives, and certainly we will be looking into that, because I think this is really, this could really be a transformative, you know, bill and really helpful for the field. There's a few more questions. Again, there's few of the same questions about TADCA and phenylbutyrate. Again, no, it's not allowed at this time in either the placebo-controlled trial or the open-label extension. However, again, if the drug is approved, it will be allowed. And it's a powder. Somebody asked if AMX 35 is a pill or a powder. It's actually a powder that gets dissolved in water. In terms of the approval timelines, again, I don't know about the approval timelines for AMX 35, but there's been a recent press release, you know, so we don't know the date and we don't know if it will be approved, but please refer to the press release from AMX 30, from Amylyx Pharmaceuticals that maybe Catherine, you can put it in the chat so that people can have the most up-to-date information about that. And in terms of if somebody is on an experimental drug, for example, the AMX 35 components or any other experimental drug, I do want to point out that there's the possibility of a washout, and then one can enter the trial. In other words, not just for AMX 35, but for any experimental drug, if somebody is taking the experimental drug but decides later on that wants to be in the platform trial, they can wash out. The washout is 30 days or 5 half-lives if known. That's because the body needs to wash out the drug. For most drugs, 30 days is just enough. There's a few selected drugs that have longer half-lives, but again, it depends, you know, on the specific drug. For AMX 35, it will be 30 days. So there's a question about placebo, and thank you for asking. And I'm also thinking that we should bring back Dr. Chibnik. We had great conversations about placebo. We had Dr. Chibnik teaches biostatistics at the Harvard School of Public Health and was on this webinar a couple of times. Maybe Catherine, if you could put a link to the recordings for her talks. She addressed the topic of placebo in much greater detail than I can do since I'm not a statistician. So the question is, why do we need placebo? So I would refer you to those webinars, but for now, I would say that there is a lot of variability between people with ALS. No two ALS patients are the same. And it's that variability that unfortunately makes it so that that we do need a placebo comparator to be able to tell if a drug works or not. So again, it's that's why, you know, that's why we need that. Now, having said that, we do minimize the number of people on placebo, again, to the extent possible, and I'm hopeful that in the future we will be able to do that even more. And question about the scientific papers accepted for publication, are they available? Yes, so they're published in the scientific literature. Now there are different timelines in terms of when the abstract is available, when the full length paper is available, and so in general, you know, we'll try to make those available open access as much as possible. So this paper was just published. Again, the abstract was published. It's not even the full publication out yet, but over the next few months, again, we expect more papers to be out. There's a question about whether there are other countries that are researching for a cure for ALS. Yes, absolutely. There's a very active international community. In December, we always have the international ALS meeting, and there's really hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers worldwide. There's also, I would say, in terms of clinical trials, there's other clinical trial consortia or networks of sites that enroll people for trials, and there's one in Europe, there's network in Asia, and there's one in the US, which is the one that's working on the platform trial. So thank you for all your questions, and really great to be back and start the year with all of you, and then we'll definitely see you again next week at the next webinar. So thank you so much. Thank you.